my last question for you, I don't know if we've ever talked about universal basic income, but recently I was discussing it on the podcast, and Zach and I have debated this endlessly. Zach does not feel the same about it as I do. He has a bunch of issues he loves to bring up. But I feel like UBI is the one policy, not the one policy, but one of the major policies that the left should really continue to kind of like own and push for, really advocate for intensely in the coming years. Not only because of automation and the fact that people are going to obviously fucking need a UBI, they already do, but also just because, I mean, honestly, I do think it's one of the few policies of the sort that's actually achievable, at least in the next like 5 or 10 years. Again, unless we see the rise of another Bernie Sanders sort of like presidential candidate, someone that could actually literally win the presidency and then potentially implement something like a Medicare for all system. But I do see UBI as the one program that, like, even within our rigidly capitalist system could kind of fly, because it doesn't really disrupt capitalism that much. If anything, it fuels capitalism even more. Like, if you're a giant corporation, a giant nationwide corporation, you would probably want people to have more money to spend at your fucking business. Like, from the perspective of the capitalist class, I don't think it is necessarily a terrible thing. So again, I don't love the fact that this might be one of the only viable policies, but that might be true. And you even hear people like Obama talk about UBI specifically as automation gets to be a bigger and bigger threat. People are acknowledging that, like, yeah, as more jobs are lost because of automation, there's going to have to be something for people to fall back on. So what do you think about the policy of universal basic income? Do you think it's something the left should really push for? And do you agree with me that it actually is like viable in a way that something like Medicare for All might not be in the current moment?
I don't know how viable it is. I tend to think it's not viable. Any big change, I feel like, is really difficult in this time. I have mixed views on it. On one hand, I think just giving people money is good policy. That's just good policy. Like, we saw how that worked with the child tax credit. It pulled, a lot of kids out of poverty. My only concern, and the reason why I'm cautiously optimistic about UBI, is that I feel like there are plenty of ways where it could go wrong, right? Like, we can get an Andrew Yang type UBI where he's offering you UBI, which is good, but then you have to choose between that and Social Security. So if it's supplementary, I think it's awesome policy. If it's a replacement to existing universal programs, I think that you have to really, really avoid that like the plague, because it's a catch-22. Another issue that I have with it is, if you just pass UBI alone, then there could be pitfalls with that. Like, if you have UBI, but you don't have any rent controls, landlords could suck up that extra $1,000 that they know you have an income now. Employers might use that as an excuse to not give pay raises or bonuses. So I think that if you couple UBI with other protections, I think it could be a really good policy. In terms of me and what I would push, I would probably push Medicare for All more than that, just because I think that it's, in terms of like what's more viable, who's to say, right? But I think that you can almost pitch Medicare for All as a sort of UBI type program in a sense, because like we're all paying a lot of money. Like, my healthcare plan is, like, with my husband, it's like $800 per month. So if I didn't have to pay that, that's just an extra $800. Yes, my taxes would go up, but I would get more and still pay less overall in taxes. You can kind of pitch it as like more money in your pocket. And I think that that's just my preference though, right? I would also, I wouldn't want universal basic income to kind of detract from this conversation that we were kind of starting to have about like a federal job guarantee, because I think that's also really important too. So my answer, which is kind of all over the place, is I like it, but I'm careful. And I think that if the left is going to push for it, there needs to be really strong parameters that we set. So like
Yeah.
libertarian ANCAPs can't take advantage of it. Give the peasants money so we can profit off of it. Like there needs to be protections, basically.
No, I totally agree with the protection, specifically rent control. Like, I think it would be a literal necessity to implement rent control at the same time as a sort of a guaranteed income would be rolled out for exactly the mentions you reason. And for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. Sorry. As far as what you said about the federal jobs guarantee, I feel like I do disagree with you a little bit there, Mike. I'm in favor of a federal jobs guarantee, like over nothing. Obviously, I think that would obviously be really preferable to the situation we're in now. But I actually do like the concept of kind of separating the idea of income from labor, and like a UBI in my mind is important not only because it literally just puts money in people's pocket that we need, but it starts to break down this like idea that money is only, or an income in general, resources are something that can only be obtained after you put in a certain number of hours of labor, right? Like, oh yeah, like you can have your basic human rights, but first you got to toil away digging ditches for the government, or like whatever the fuck a federal jobs guarantee, which would entail. Not that that isn't serious work that probably does need to be done, but I also feel like we're kind of approaching a fork in the road with automation, where it's like, how is society going to be structured? What is income, and how is it obtained? And what is a basic human right versus what do we have to work like, fucking slaves to obtain, whether it's healthcare or literal wages, food, shelter, etc. And yeah, obviously we joke around about fully automated luxury communism, but I do think the left should seriously be part of the conversation as automation takes over and how we restructure our society, and what the point and what the point of like living should be. And I think UBI does go a long way in kind of changing the way that people think about that. That obviously, if you want to work, you should, and that is a enriching and fulfilling experience that can lead to greater resources, that you can build up more riches and, more of a savings account, more of an ability to travel and do whatever you want. But no one should have to work and toil in order just to eat or like pay rent or live in the most basic way possible. So that's why I do think the left should really focus on UBI and pushing for it, and making sure that it doesn't get co-opted by like fucking libertarians and people like Andrew Yang who just want to use it as like a bait and switch. No, we need to be like the architects of this new society. And if it's not going to be the left, it's going to be corporations, it's going to be libertarians. Not that we really have all that much power, but might as well talk about it, right?
Yeah. No, that's fair. I think that's some really good counter arguments, and separating like the money from the labor. I like that. So yeah, you might have won me a little bit on that point. That's a really great point.
I think that there's a reason that when Andrew Yang was running, it was like kind of like, it was so obviously sloganeering on his point, but I think it's what makes UBI a really good kind of topic to discuss. Gavin and I have gotten hours and hours of content out of just debating the like minutia, about whether or not, like, because I tend to agree with you a little bit more on the jobs guarantee, but I agree with Gavin on like the premise that you shouldn't like have to fucking like that we should establish a baseline of living. But
it's a great pitch.
I'm worried that we would like have nobody to dig, like, not that we need, you know what I mean? It's like, not I'm not 100% sure on that, but
listen to Joe Rogan. No, I'm just kidding.
I am Joe Rogan. I'm Joe Rogan. I hate poor people. But I think there's a reason that, when Andrew Yang went up there, he would say this is a policy that was supported by Milton Friedman and Martin Luther King Jr. was the lefty. Sorry, it was not Upton Sinclair and Milton Friedman. It was Martin Luther King Jr. and Milton Friedman. And it's because it really radically depends on how you implement this policy. Are you using it as a way to further wash money from the government and give it back to yourself through the poor and the through exploitation, or are you doing it in the sense that it's like, yes, we want to establish a baseline of living, we want to guarantee that our poor don't go hungry in this country, right? And I personally think that we'll probably ideally, fingers crossed, end up in some sort of like Keynesian arrangement where we get to like a 15-hour work week. We split the difference. It's like you do 15 hours worth of something that's good for your community, whatever it is, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, and then you give the money back from the society. And so it doesn't, maybe you're not skilled at fucking manicuring lawns. Maybe you are and you like love to do gardening. I don't have a green thumb. I'll fucking kill whatever you put me in. But if you ask me to like haul trash or something, I'm skilled enough to do that. You know, put in your time. You know, if you want somebody to work the griddle, I got y'all. You know what I mean? Shake up some martinis. You know, everybody contributes. You get your 15 hours of work in. I don't know. I think that there's definitely some middle ground to play with. I do like the idea as well as just divorcing people from their like standard of living. I just think the implementation and getting the American people on board is going to be a little bit difficult of a task, because this is a country that has been beaten into your head that like hard work and labor is like where you derive your value. And that's because we have a very like Judeo-Christian background of like the Abrahamic shit where it's like, work and toil in this life and then that's basically every religion. Actually, we could talk about how religions are scams. But if you work and toil in this life for some guy that's like fucking richer than you, but then you're going to be the king of king, you're going to live in luxury for all eternity. It's like, that's very obviously a scam to get you to work and grind for like some king somewhere, but we don't have to unpack that today. It's that same value set though that leads Americans to be like, well, what are people going to do? They're just going to take shits and masturbate in the streets if we give them a fucking universal basic income. You know what I mean?